to another brand new episode of Dingers and Stingers, the podcast that knows that sometimes the best defense is a good offense and a good defense as well. You need that too. I'm Dallas, that's Drew, and that's Matt, and we're here for another brand new episode, our Super Bowl recap show. That's what we'll tackle in the first half. I'll get to that shortly, but the second half is going to start our weekly division previews for the MLB. So that season's coming up shortly. You know, pitchers and catchers have begun to report. Spring training is right around the corner. We are so pumped that baseball is coming back, and we are going to spend a lot of time over the next month or so, month and a half, talking about in depth about these divisions, where we expect these teams to go, and how we expect the MLB season to play out. So we'll tackle the NL East first this week in the second half of our show. But yes, first we are going to recap Super Bowl 59, which we all watched on Sunday, right? We were all watching.
Oh yeah.
All right. Great. And so, where were you guys watching? I turntailed my parents' house, and watched there. I figured this would be a Super Bowl where, I didn't really, mind too much what was going on, just generally, so I could spend some time with the fam. Little did I know how true that would be, how very unimportant it became to pay attention. But where were you guys at? How did you watch? Did you enjoy?
Dude, yeah, I was at my parents' house too. I had the exact same kind of rationale. I was like, you know what? I love watching a good game with my dad. Went over to the house, posted it up, and honestly, I ended up hanging out with like my nephew and doing other stuff a lot during the game. So I was like, ah, it's ah.
Yeah, I was at a friend's house who has built a a sports bar in their garage, which is really awesome. And so watched it there. There was a good amount of people there, and it was a nice split of football fans who are all rooting for the Eagles because they are Chiefs haters like myself, and then people who really didn't care and were just kind of hanging out and watched the halftime show and all that. Had some drinks, had some food, hung out with our fantasy league champion Matt Robertson.
Sure.
So watched the game with him.
What a guy.
And yeah, I had a great time watching that game.
Nice. Yeah. It was a great Super Bowl to chat, have fun, get into partake in some things that get you into a state where you're not, super alert, super paying attention, but you're having a lot of fun. And so, great Super Bowl for that. Well, let's get to why. The Eagles won the Super Bowl, and the final score, as we all know, was 40-22 in favor of the Eagles. I will say, because I'm a Chiefs hater, 16 of those Chiefs points were scored with less than 3 minutes left. So, really, what was the score of the game? You know what I mean? And I mean, it was 34-0 at one point. I mean, this was a monumental beatdown. I mean, and it was almost unbelievable, like when we were watching. But the MVP, of course, went to Jalen Hurts, because in the absence of anybody else to give it to, you give it to the quarterback, and that's how it goes. I mean, the man played a great game. We'll get to this more later, but it was basically the Chiefs said they dared him to beat him, and he did. And we'll get to that more later. But the first thing I want to ask is, when something like this happens, a Super Bowl 48, a Bucks Chiefs Super Bowl, whichever number that was. When did it become clear to you guys that this was going to be a beatdown?
Dude, I did predict that the Chiefs would win this game, and I'll take that in stride. But I think, and as screwed up as this is, there was a part of me when it hit it tied or was super close. I remember turning to my dad and being like, dude, are they setting this up so that he can beat Tom Brady's comeback deficit record? Like, is that what this is going to come down to? I think it was like sometime in like the early third. And then I remember I said that like the second it was, I believe, the bomb to Devontae Smith, where they took the like 30 something point lead, and I was like, oh, never mind. They're actually just getting their like asses kicked. Like, this isn't just, the script happening. the Eagles came out in the second half and just looked similarly as dominant as they did in the first half. Anytime it's a Super Bowl and you've got backups playing, that's crazy. Like
Kenny
Crazy.
Pickett getting snaps. Yeah, that's
Pretty
Kenny
crazy.
Pickett got snaps, and I saw the NFL posted on Twitter the play where it was the deep ball to Xavier Worthy, and they're like, they said something trying to glaze Patrick Mahomes, and it's like, hey, dude, that's against like their backup corners and backup safeties, and that's Patrick Mahomes and his first round pick receiver. Maybe pump the brakes a little bit. Like yeah, I don't know. I would say it took me a while to really get into the mindset of like, wow, this is really happening. Like they're really just getting dominated. I was so brainwashed. Like this is all for the script. This is all a show to make sure everyone knows. Like, hey, three-peat, and at the same time overcoming the 28-point deficit or whatever it was. Like that really would have just made his case, but nah, dude, they got spanked.
yeah. I had a similar. I didn't. The game script didn't occur to me, but I did have a similar thought. I remember when Cooper DeJean got the pick
Pick
six,
six.
it made
Hmm.
it 17-0.
Hmm.
And me and the people I was watching with, we were all excited. And I remember saying out loud, I'm like, but I'm not going to feel good until it's like 35-0. I think that was the score I said.
Hmm.
Because, it's Patrick Mahomes and you can't count him out. Um, and then he immediately threw like another pick
Yeah.
and just, he wasn't looking good. And so like, it was 24-0 at the half, right? I believe. And
Yeah.
so like, I was with you, like, Tom Brady came back from a greater deficit later in the game, so I'm not counting this over, but I'm enjoying myself because the Eagles look great. But yeah, it was the Devontae Smith touchdown that was just a bomb,
Hmm.
uh, where I was like, oh, like it's just going to be that game. Like that's
Yeah.
just what we're seeing. Um, and there was like a couple drives, like there was a drive where, like I think maybe Kansas City had just gotten a stop. They were still down by a lot, but they had just gotten a stop, and then Patrick Mahomes gets sacked two plays in a row, and it's like
Mm.
he just can't get it going. And I predicted an Eagles win, but I did not predict it like this. I thought if they were going to win, it was going to be a lot of Saquon Barkley. It really wasn't.
Dude.
And I thought the defense, like, so to my credit, I guess, I thought the defense would have to play a great game. Vic Fangio would have to come in with a great game
Hmm.
plan. It seems like that's what happened. It reminded me a lot of that Bucks Chiefs Super Bowl from a few years ago, where Mahomes snaps the ball and he's immediately running away. He's
Yeah.
just not comfortable in the pocket. Um, and yeah, so I guess to answer the question, it was the Devontae Smith touchdown.
Yeah, dude, it feels
Yeah.
like that really was the moment. Like the game just felt over. Like,
Hmm.
I mean, 30 something points on top of just talk about being demoralized. Like, you've been so good on that side of the ball, stopping explosive plays. And for Jalen Hurts to put one over you like that, like, hey, I mean, just a full breakdown of a team, honestly. But I want to point out there because you talked about your predictions. Shout outs to Dallas. Dallas actually like nailed the predictions. High scoring Eagles team. Jalen Hurts MVP. I mean, snaps for Dallas, dude. Like he nailed that.
For me, like, yeah, it was definitely,
Dallas
yeah,
knows ball.
I think we all agree on when the moment we thought it was over, like capital O, over. Because I agree too. That's when I, went to go, play Legos with my nephew, it was after that. And so I was like, all right, I can bounce to the other room, for a while. But, I think, yeah, Drew mentioned it though. It was that sequence in the second quarter where the Eagles defense went sack, pick six. And I was like, hey, they have got something working that
Hmm.
is the kind of thing that can keep working. Like if they can really like stay with it, and if the Chiefs can't correct, they are going to be able to win this game. And um, you know, it was just I couldn't even believe what I was seeing at a certain point, because
It
you're
was
not used to
shocking.
seeing, yeah, you're not used to seeing these guys,
Yeah.
these Chiefs be down and out like this and not be able to come back and not be able to mentally get things together and fix things and figure things out. Especially when, you know, it's not as though the Eagles were, they didn't split the atom in their game plan, their defensive game plan. I mean, they didn't blitz once. And it felt
Yeah.
like they
It
were
was a
rushing
four-man
six
rush. Yeah.
Dude,
it felt like they
I
were
was gonna
rushing six the entire game.
I was gonna bring that up. The fact that they didn't blitz a single time, and
Yeah.
yet at the end of the game, I think they showed the stat, they had pressure on 52% of passing attempts. 52%
Crazy.
with zero blitz. You're talking about guys just dominating the person in front of them. And I mean, we're going to get into all this, but I saw so many clips of people that the fans love really fumbling the bag on some of their plays for the Chiefs. Yeah, we'll
Oh
get into
yeah.
that, but dude, it's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think this segues nicely into something that the first thing we want to talk about, which was, get into some specifics about what went. Let's start with the positive. What went right for the Eagles. I mean, what didn't? First of all, generally speaking, but what was it that went so right for them? What was it about this team and these players that made this what it was?
Do you want to go first or me?
Yeah, yeah. So the Eagles, we talked about their defense already. Vic Fangio came in with a game plan.
Yeah.
It clearly worked. But I want to give a shout out to Jalen Hurts because um, a lot of people, including us on this podcast, have kind of belittled his contributions to this team. Because he really, as far as quarterbacks in the game go, he's not the most important quarterback to their respective team. Uh, their team is just built very well. Like it seems like a lot of quarterbacks could play there and win. And I think that's all still true, but at the same time, he's the guy there. He can't help, you know, what how good the team is, but he goes in there, he shows up, he makes plays when he has to. This was a game, like Dallas said, where they were like, okay, the Chiefs came in, we're not going to let Saquon beat us. Jalen Hurts has to beat us, and he went out and did it. He was dropping those passes in. Um, he's the MVP kind of because there was no clear standout performer, but like still, I don't think it's like an insane. It's not the most egregious MVP in a Super Bowl, and you know, to go to a Super Bowl twice and then to win one, it's not that's not common. That's not for a quarterback. That's pretty rare. In the history of Super Bowls, the names. I mean, there's um, less than 20 guys have done that, and they're all like household names, basically. So I'm not saying this win puts Jalen Hurts on top of the quarterback mountain as like elite, as a guy that should be making more money than anyone or anything like that. But I think, he gets discounted a little too much. And I think this game made me realize like he's a pretty good quarterback and he can show up in the biggest game and seem calm, cool, and collected. He's not panicking out there, and he's making the plays that need to be made. And I think, uh, he's got the leg talent. He has a strong arm, but he doesn't always make the best throws. But I think he has it up here, and I think that's like maybe the most important thing for a quarterback. And so I just want to give him a little more credit and apologize for how much I've discounted him as part of this team.
Yeah, dude, for sure. I think, we can own up to last week us saying if Patrick Mahomes wins, it's because he's Superman, and if Jalen Hurts wins, it's because of a great team. And I think that's kind of, going off of the question you asked, Dallas, like what kind of went wrong, if anything, for the Eagles. I think the only thing you could say that went wrong, and it didn't even go that wrong, their run game wasn't there outside of Jalen Hurts. It was a lot of short yardage, kind of bottled up run game, and it was actually Jalen Hurts who kept taking off um, after a broken down pocket and picking up those 15, 20, 30-yard runs that kind of just break the back of a defense. So yeah, definitely banking off what Drew just said. Like big shout out to Jalen Hurts. I mean, he's earned a lot of respect and I think a lot of people's minds because he did it on the ground and through the air. And I mean, the dude's proving he's just been a winner everywhere he's ever gone. He's just been a winner. Yeah. Aside from that, I mean, dude, everything went right for the Eagles. Like, what didn't go right for the Eagles? I feel like they won every
Jake
category of the
Elliott was
game.
making every kick. He'd had to do it multiple times, like every time, and he
Yeah,
was
I
still
mean,
making them all.
he was just nailing what would have been 65 yarders routinely down the middle. And the fact that they get the pick six, they win the turnover battle in a landslide. And it's just there's so many things. Jalen Hurts looks so comfortable. Patrick Mahomes did not. And I mean, you could see players from the Chiefs, they just looked demoralized. Like,
They gave up a lot of them.
yeah, it really looked like that. And that's kind of what I was referencing just a second ago. I don't know if you guys have seen the clips of uh, Travis Kelce.
Yeah.
It's a bad look, dude. Like, say what you want about all the outside stuff of Travis. He's always been a great player who's been typically kind of like the heart and soul of the offense, high energy guy. It's like a George Kittle if you're talking about like the mentality he brings. And to watch him, there's the one play that keeps running in my mind of Patrick Mahomes, yeah, scrambling out onto the sideline. He's dodged like 3 or 4 tackles. Travis Kelce does not move from where he's at. It like pretty close to where the play is happening. He's got one hand on his guy and he's just standing there watching. And it's like, dude, you can't just give up on your team like that. Like,
And how many
it,
times have we seen Patrick Mahomes escape a pocket, run around for a little bit, and throw it to the suddenly wide open Travis Kelce? Like
mhm.
I don't get. Yeah,
Ev-
I saw that
ev-
same clip, and
yeah, it's like every great quarterback that, is considered an improviser has a equally great receiver or tight end who's an improviser. Like you can't just scramble around and expect magic to happen if your receivers run the route and then stop. There has to be a level of like innate football sense and just the feeling of the game to know like, okay, my guy's rolling out to the right. I got to go find a pocket over there to get open, or I got to get behind my defender. Something. You got to give them something, and just ooh, I saw that I was just like, if I was a Chiefs fan, I would be mad right now. Like it just the leaders of your team, it looks like gave up in the middle of the game. You can't have that. Like that's which is crazy because all we've done is talk about how from the top down, they're this well-run team, and Andy Reid and Spags are just leading this locker room, and they have a winning culture. Dude, I did not see a winning culture. I saw a team who wanted to be gifted their participation Super Bowl award. Like it didn't look like what the Chiefs have been since this regime has been here.
I credit the Eagles for showing up and making it where it felt like the Chiefs had no hope. You know,
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, when you can go into a neutral sort of a neutral environment and make it feel like they're coming in here and trying to beat you right away. When you can make it feel like that, it can be very impactful from the very start. And something that I want to mention too is just you when you going into the game because of Jalen Carter, there were going to be opportunities for some of these other guys on the defensive line to have one-on-ones and they were going to have to win those. You hope that one or two of them can win a handful of their one-on-ones that they get when
Hmm.
they're doubling Jalen Carter and get some sacks. Everybody was winning their one-on-ones, and that's why the four-man rush was so effective, was because there wasn't a single one of them who was getting a one-on-one opportunity that wasn't winning. And that just goes to show that there was a team that went in there who really wanted to win and really wanted to put a stop to something. The idea of the Chiefs' inevitability, the Eagles, their players, they went in there and
They
wanted to
took it
end it.
personally.
And exactly, yeah,
and they
they
set the
wanted to end that.
edge. They did not let Mahomes, for the most part, get outside and do that thing that he does so often.
Yeah.
Uh, so, I mean, I know how many dads are screaming at their screen every time anyone plays the Chiefs, like, keep him in the pocket, set the edge. But they,
Dude,
they did a
that's
beautiful job.
that's dad football 101 is you got to set the edge. You got to
Mm.
play hard-nosed football and set the edge.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. But so yeah, we've touched on some of this stuff already, but I want to go into it a little more. We talked about what went right for the Eagles. What went wrong for the Chiefs here? Like, we talked about a little bit about Mahomes not looking right. We talked about a little lack of effort there as the game went on. But what else did you guys want to highlight that maybe went wrong for the Chiefs here?
I think that I mean, I think they just showed up with kind of a mindset of like, we're gonna win this thing because that's what we do. And the Eagles came with, we really want to win this thing, so we're gonna do what we can to win this thing. So
Yeah.
it felt like the Chiefs just did like they weren't crisp, they weren't like fully ready for what they were about to face. And I want to, like Patrick Mahomes, no doubt, already an all-time great quarterback. There might be more Super Bowls in his future, like not taking away from that. But his numbers this game are going to come out looking pretty good because he got those garbage time touchdowns. Like he had more passing yards than Jalen Hurts by the end of the game. Uh, I think that's, we should have like a caveat, an asterisk for this because like he did not play a great game. And it's
Mhm.
not necessarily 100% his fault, like he was running for his life, but um, we did not see the best Patrick Mahomes. We, as we discussed, did not see the best Travis Kelce out there. Um, and just the defense, it's looked like they put all their energy into stopping Saquon Barkley, which to their credit, they did a pretty good job of.
Mhm.
But you forget, like, when we did our draft a couple weeks ago, like the Eagles have two really, really good receivers that you also have
Hmm.
to guard. Not to mention Jahan Dotson showing up for some big plays here and there.
Bruh.
Um, but that like it just like like what Matt said, what went right for the Eagles? Everything. What went wrong for the Chiefs? Basically everything. They lot
Yeah.
like I mean, that was another thing we haven't even touched on yet. Was like especially in the first half, it was like I was getting all those. Every time there was a flag, I was like, "Oh, here we go," because like like here's like the Chiefs bailout call, and then it kept being against the Chiefs, and it was like, "Whoa, like what's happening?" But basically, what we've talked about for every week of the playoffs, the Chiefs in the regular season were not that good of a team. They just
No.
kept winning. And I think we finally saw what we were talking about, which is a team that's really not that great that made it to the Super Bowl and played a team that was truly great and was truly ready to play them and wasn't afraid of the aura of the Kansas City Chiefs and the potential three-peat. And they just, you know, showed up and took it to them.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Drew, you like hit it on the head. There's not much else you can really say. It's just the Chiefs got beat in every aspect of the game, and you can point to a few small things if you really want to start handing out, credit to certain players or position groups. They didn't miss a lot of tackles. If they got to a guy, they got him, but they let Jalen Hurts run all over him, and they got cooked through the air, and they were the team committing penalties. And aside from what I think it was on the second or third drive of the game, getting that pick off of a tipped ball or a hit arm or whatever it was.
It was kind of an arm punt anyway. Like it wasn't
Yeah,
the
it
worst.
was just they just threw it down to like the 4 yard line, like, and I think the next play was a pick, right? Like I
It
think
was
it was
that
like the next.
drive, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, because I remember they were backed up to the end zone and Patrick Mahomes threw a pick, and so it's
Yeah.
just like even the single mistake you can point out for the Eagles was instantly capitalized on, um, going the other way. And so it's just like, man, I don't know what went right for the Chiefs. It like the coaching staff didn't seem to have a plan. They looked lost out there. The players were giving minimal effort outside of a few guys. Uh, yeah, I don't. I can't remember the last time I was left as like speechless from a performance in the Super Bowl. Even other blowouts we've seen have felt like the teams were at least in it to try. I've never seen someone on the biggest stage stand there in the middle of a play and not care. I
Yeah.
mean, we're talking like what other players can we name that have done that? At least Antonio Brown waited till he was on the sideline to, throw a fit. Like,
Well, that wasn't even the Super Bowl. Like this is
but
the
but
Super
but you,
Bowl.
I
Yeah.
know, and that's what I'm saying. It's just like you got a chance for history, and you're giving it up because of what? Like you're tired or you're discouraged? Like that's like the opposite of the football mentality. People talk all the time like football, it's such a grind. Like you have to put so much of yourself into it to be anything. And then to get to the Super Bowl after the season you've had, knowing you probably weren't like feeling that dominant all year, knowing you guys were just kind of putting together these wins and getting there, and then to just, they didn't even fall flat. They just didn't try. And I think that's what's really crazy to me. And, the big one that's going to, everyone's going to talk about is the multiple plays that Travis Kelce had. And I don't want to pin it all on Travis Kelce. But dude, when you're a superstar, obviously you're under the microscope, and you're going to be the one who gets targeted more in the media. But it's like I can probably pull up 5 or 6 different plays right now that he didn't even attempt to be a part of. And I remember, that used to be a big complaint of Randy Moss on the like Raiders. And it's like he used to go out there and just kind of not run his routes. If it was a run play, he wouldn't do anything. And it's like, that's not how you win. That Raiders team that Randy Moss was on routinely just sucked. And it's like, if that's kind of the way the Chiefs are shifting as to having their superstars not really care, that's, that doesn't bode well for their future. And maybe this is Travis's last game and he just really wanted to take it all in from the field. I don't know. But like,
If that's his last game, which I saw, like there's rumors, he's
mhm.
taking it under consideration or whatever, um, then that's just a terrible look. It looks like a team that you like because they won the last two and they won three of the last five. Like they've been there before, like more than anyone else can say. And it looked like a team that was like, oh, this isn't fun when we're losing. Like I only like it when we win. So let's just
Yeah.
get this game over with, and like
Hmm. Hmm.
uh,
They
it's
look
like
like
when
sore losers.
it's like I play a lot of board games. It's like the person who's like definitely out of it, and so they're just like not even trying for their turns anymore. And it's like okay, that like in this case, it. I think the Eagles still had plenty of fun, but like for the viewers, it's like that's just give it an effort at least. I mean, it's just if you're a Chiefs fan watching that the high you were at before the game started to where you ended up must be uh, night and day. But I don't really have much pity for you because you are a very spoiled fan base at this point. But
Oh yeah.
um, yeah, it was crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. A crazy game for sure. And you know, something I was thinking about was, the sort of the MVP of it all. And I was thinking the whole game, you know, we know who made this game what it was for the Eagles. We know who's responsible for it. It's the defense as a unit. They were responsible for setting their team up for success here. They're making all these plays, but the problem with that is that there isn't currently a way to honor that kind of team performance with like MVP award status unless there's one of the players on the team who balls out, like Malcolm Smith from Super Bowl 48, Von Miller from Super Bowl 50. For the Eagles, no one had multiple picks. Like Josh Sweat and Williams, I forget what his first name is,
Hilton.
but yeah, they both had basically the same number of sacks, so it was like there really wasn't one guy. So I want to know, where where are you guys on like, should there be a situation for special Super Bowls like this where it's just like, you know what? We're giving the MVP to the defense, and then they can all come up and say word. But like, I know there's money involved and there's like prizes involved or whatever in MVP. But what do you guys think about that? Honoring the defense in a situation like this when really it was their game.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and we don't have to go into it this week, but like it speaks to the bigger issue of awards in general in the NFL. The fact that the Offensive Player of the Award is basically the best non-quarterback award, and the MVP is the best quarterback award. And the same thing goes for this. Like, it takes a truly different type of individual performance for someone who isn't the quarterback to win the Super Bowl MVP. And you can look and see really like particularly average performances win it just because they're the quarterback. And I don't know, I think we underplay the idea that like, dude, I think Cooper DeJean was absolutely worthy of winning Super Bowl MVP all on his own. I think Josh Sweat was worthy of winning Super Bowl MVP all on his own. I think you could say the same for, like you said, three or four other players on that defense who all had, in their own right, really respectable or dominant performances. I think honestly, it just takes a little bit of critical thinking on behalf of the voters. Like, I don't know. I don't think that there should be an issue. And if you wanted to say like give it to the defense as a whole, I think defensive guys would love it. Like, dude, I don't think you would ever hear a player complain about, specifically, I should say, a defensive player complain about their defense winning a champ or a Super Bowl MVP. And if you can't do that, then I do just give it to one of the players. Who cares? Like, it's about rewarding the players who made the biggest difference. And I don't want to literally walk back right over what we just talked about with Jalen Hurts. He had an awesome game. He did an awesome job. He did everything correct. He didn't make the mistakes, right? That's a huge part of playing the game is not making the mistakes. But this goes into a different topic of like, can we keep rewarding average performances or above average performances and saying that they were great? Can we keep awarding game managers elite quarterback statuses because they win games? Typically, a game manager wins games because of the team around them. And you have to be good at managing the game to manage the game. And, Tom Brady's arguably, for most people, the best quarterback of all time. I would argue he's also the best game manager of all time. He had some really incredible players around. And so, I don't know. I think it's at a really weird spot where it's at because, like you're saying, the defense won that game, and I don't think even Jalen Hurts said that. He's literally in his post game. He literally was like, "Defenses win championships, man. Like that's just case in point. The Chiefs had no chance because of the defense. It wasn't because of this, you know, all world offense and explosive pass game and all this stuff. Like that was awesome. And they took advantage of the opportunities given to them by their defense. So I don't know. At that point, I mean, if you can't name a defensive guy, give it to the punter or the kicker or something. I mean, imagine a punter winning Super Bowl MVP with no punts. Like, I don't know. It's just, I think the MVP awards, just as a whole, have gotten too one-sided about positions. Like, I love that Jalen Hurts did this. I'm super happy for him, and no one will ever convince me that he was the best player on the Eagles during that game.
Yeah, I agree. Like he was not the MVP. I do think the Super Bowl MVP is kind of, for me, more of like a fun piece of trivia than it is actual like super meaningful thing. Um, but because it's one game, it's like sometimes it's very obvious who the best player in a game was, but for the most part, over the course of just like a season, you can tell like, okay, this guy was the most valuable player or whatever. But for one game, it's sometimes hard to tell. I think I agree with Matt that like I don't even know how they vote on Super Bowl MVP, but like I think if you give it to you just pick a defensive player, you pick Cooper DeJean, um, because it was his birthday and he got a pick six, uh,
Awesome.
then I think the defense takes that as the defense got the award. Because like you brought up like Malcolm Smith and you brought up Von Miller. Like Von Miller was like definitely he had the most plays, but it was like he got like 2.5 sacks in a game, and he got MVP. And what they're saying by giving him that award is like the defense is the reason you won this Super Bowl. So I
Yeah.
think there's I don't think you'd have to give it to the whole team because I don't think anyone's winning the Super Bowl and then sitting there pouting because they didn't win MVP and they thought they should have. Uh, just give it to any defensive player, and that's the MVP. So I don't know, like, because I know how they do it for baseball for the World Series. It's like there's writers that are there covering it and they vote, and sometimes it's very rare, but it's been like multiple people have gotten World Series MVP. So like I don't know, do they have ties? Do they break the ties somehow? It just seems funny to me that like if that's the way they do it, or no matter how they do it, like most people wrote down the name Jalen Hurts because it's like it just seems like he would have been like fourth or fifth on my list, of names I would have written down. Am I mad about it? Not really, because like I said, it's more of a fun piece of trivia. And it's hard for football too because like football more than any other sport, each position is totally its own thing and affects the game in such a different way.
Yeah.
I think it's like, you can't really argue that the quarterback is the most important position in general because they touch the ball so often and they have to run the offense. But yeah, like and we can talk about the season award winners next week. We didn't allot any time for that this week, but like, yeah, it's just been quarterbacks like for like 90% of MVP awards or more maybe.
Hmm.
But um, is that right? Is that wrong? I don't know. But it's just really I don't know how to evaluate football the same way. Like it's really easy in baseball to be like whose hitting stats were the best. It doesn't really matter what position they played. And then you can take in other things, as tiebreakers, this and that. It's easy in basketball, even though there's five positions. It's kind of positionless, but like they're all doing basically the same thing. You can tell who's
Yeah.
doing the best. It's just hard in football, and it's I don't envy the voters. I'll say that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I looked it up. Uh, it's made up the final allotment of kind of how they weigh the voting process. There is a fan voting process that happens starting around halftime through the end. And that makes up 20% of the final vote is the fans. Um,
That's a problem
now,
right there because fans are stupid.
fans will always go for the quarterbacks. I mean, that's just,
A name
I,
they know.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's the biggest name. They go for the biggest position.
I wouldn't be shocked if Patrick Mahomes had a few hundred fan votes, you know?
I'm sure he had more than that, honestly. The rest of the 80% comes from 16 media panelists. I don't know how those panelists are chosen or which media platforms they represent, but it's 20% from fans, 80% is from 16 media panelists. So, I mean, I, I don't know. I've never quite understood why media gets so much of a say in who's the best. I've always more respected when it comes down to like players or coaches. I think that would be another thing is, dude, have the winning team select their own MVP.
Yeah, for real. For
Because you
real.
want to know who
They'll
knows
tell
who
you.
made the biggest impact? The players who felt it, right? Like,
Hmm.
you imagine if they got to pick their own MVP, I'm sure they would have, maybe Jalen Hurts gets picked. They love a quarterback. Like, their teams love their quarterbacks, typically. But also, if there was someone who truly made a bigger impact on the game, they would know best who that was. And if you want to still give it some variety, dude, let the opposing team get 20% of the vote. Like, let the Chiefs vote on who killed them. I mean,
Yeah.
that's kind of funny. Like,
Well, it's
I'm
like
not
it's no
against that.
different than a regular season game, a coach giving out a game ball, you know? Like
Hmm.
the team knows, the team knows
Yeah,
who
yeah,
contributed.
yeah.
100%. 100%. And I think some interesting ideas there. I like having the team select their own. I like what I don't, and I'm not in favor of is 20% of it being the same way that how we chose an American Idol in the 2000s. Like I don't like texting in your vote or clicking in your vote. Uh, you know, but yeah. So look, that's the Super Bowl. The end of the 2024-2025
Congratulations,
NFL
Eagles.
season. Yeah, the end of the season, the Eagles stand the tallest. What will happen from here? Who knows? The offseason is upon us. We already had Kellen Moore depart the Eagles, for the Saints to be their head coach, in the same building. That he may just not leave, stay in the hotel, tell the fam to pack up the house and meet you out here. But yeah, so
Skip the parade.
we already had him depart the Eagles. So, head coaches are all set for next year. So, the offseason will be very interesting, to see who moves around, what shakes and how we tackle it. But, yeah, for now, like we mentioned, maybe next week we'll get to some, awards, regular season awards talk. There was the big, really close MVP race this year we could talk about. But for now, that's the book closed on the 2024 NFL season. We look forward to, like I said, an eventful off season. It was a great season, so much fun. And look, Seahawks fans everywhere love those garbage time points from the Super Bowl because when it was 34-40-6, it was looking like 43-8 was going to get dwarfed, and 40-22 feels a little better for me.
Yeah, yeah.
So where we want to move now is over to our MLB portion of today's show. We're like I said, we're really stoked. Baseball's coming back. I love to see, the iPhone photos from beat reporters with the zoomed in through the fences, watching people come in with their duffel bags.
Hmm.
It's on. Who got a haircut this spring? Who had to shave their beard? Shout out to Devin Williams, who had the beard for a reason, as it
Looks
turns
wrong.
out.
Looks wrong.
Uh,
So bad.
but yeah, so I love seeing all that stuff. It gets me hyped, and in the spirit of that, we're going to spend a lot of time in the next little while, as I mentioned before, on some division previews, diving deep into what we think this season's going to look like for all of these teams. And where we're starting this week is with the NL East. And so the where we'll start is with where we've been, and then we'll talk about where we're going, which is our predictions for the 2025 season. But I'll start here with where we've been. 2024 final standings for this division. The Phillies ended in first place, 95 wins. They ended up losing to the Mets, their division rival, in the division series last postseason. The Braves finished second, 89 wins, lost the wild card to the Padres in that playoffs. The Mets were in third place, also 89 wins. They lost in the NLCS to the Dodgers, made it the furthest of anybody in this division, despite finishing third place, even kicking out, as we mentioned before, their division rival in the Phillies. And then, so those were the three teams that finished at the top. They all three made the playoffs. And then the bottom two teams in this division were two of the worst teams in baseball. The Nationals with 71 wins, and then the Marlins with 62 wins. And I always like to say it if they have a triple-digit losses, 100 losses, because that just sounds crazy. 100 losses sounds crazy. And so that's where last season ended for these teams. And so where we want to start today, we're going to go as we predict, how these teams will do this year. We're going to go in that order, so in finishing order from the previous year. That's how we'll do it for all of our previous year. And so we'll start with the Phillies. So to set that up, we already talked about they finished first in this division last year. Didn't make it as far in the playoffs as they wanted to. I think a lot of us maybe wanted to see that Phillies Dodgers, NLCS, and see the Phillies come out on top of that. Maybe not Matt. I guess for obvious reasons, but I wanted to see the Phillies beat the Dodgers in the CS and go to the World Series. And so obviously didn't make it as far as they wanted. There were rumors this offseason that were surrounding some of their positional core, like Nick Castellanos and Alec
Mhm.
Boehm. Teams were calling on those guys. Nationals or the Phillies were listening on those guys, but nothing came to fruition. At the end of it all, and as of today, spring training starting, both of those guys appear to be well locked in to their current roles on that team, and the positional core of that team remains largely intact from the year before. In fact, just a couple of really, notable changes to the staff for this year, both surrounding pitching. So they're betting on a bounce back year from Jordan Romano. He's going to probably be their closer. And so they added him for that role. And then they also added Jesus Luzardo for sort of round out their starting rotation. So that's where the Phillies were. That's where there they are right now. That's where they stand now. So I'll kick it to you guys. Where are the Phillies going this year in your mind?
Yeah, the Phillies, it's interesting because they a couple years ago, 2022, they made it to the World Series, and it was kind of like ahead of schedule. It felt like it didn't feel like they were necessarily the best team in the National League, but they made it to the World Series. And then the next year, they were a little better and got eliminated by the uh, Diamondbacks in the championship series. And that was kind of like, whoa, Phillies were the better team there. And then last year, the Phillies looked for a lot of the season like the best team in the National League, kind of faltered towards the end, and then kind of went out with a whimper against the Mets, which is kind of what they did to the Braves the previous 2 years. But yeah, it really, this is a team like you just read the names: Bryce Harper, Trey Turner, Kyle Schwarber, Nick Castellanos, Zach Wheeler, Aaron Nola. Like these are names we all know. Like they have been good players in this league for a long time. Um, but I don't know. I'm a little bit like I'm not like out on the Phillies, but I'm a little bit worried about the Phillies because they clearly didn't have as much money to spend this offseason as they had in previous years, which is how they got so many big name players. So they didn't do much. They made a big trade for Jesus Luzardo, as you mentioned. They also signed Max Kepler to play outfield, and he's kind of like a bounce back candidate as well. They lost a couple of good bullpen arms in Jeff Hoffman and Carlos Estevez. So I don't know. I think the Phillies, like I think they still can hit for sure. But I think it'll be streakier. Like I think Nick Castellanos is not close to what he used to be. I think JT Realmuto is not close to what he used to be. I don't think Alec Boehm has, besides like the first half of last year, has ever been particularly good. And I think they really, really were looking to dump some salary this offseason, and just nothing ever came to fruition. They didn't find the deals they were looking for.
Yeah.
Um, that being said, they're going to be a tough team to play. And the main reason I think is their starting rotation. Zach Wheeler is a top five pitcher in baseball. And then the four guys behind him are no slouches. Aaron Nola, Christopher Sanchez, Ranger Suarez, Jesus Luzardo. Those are all guys who, at their best, could be all stars. Um, so if they're all pitching to their potential, then I think they have a good shot. They also have Andrew Painter, I believe is his name, who's a
Yeah,
top pitching prospect.
yeah.
Uh, so I expect him at some point this year. It's kind of nice now with a little less pressure. He doesn't have like he's not being given a rotation spot right now. We'll see if there's any injuries or anything, but yeah, I mean, I think they'll be solid, but I just worry, the clock's ticking on this core a little bit. They might have to shake some things up in the future.
Yeah, no, I think you hit it on the head. I mean, when I was going through, quick shouts to Drew on the blog if you guys want to check it out. I'm sure we can link
We'll
it or
link it.
post it or
Yeah.
something. But I was going through your breakdown, and I think the name that stuck out to me, and just being a more casual baseball fan, I think I've seen this decline, and if I'm noticing a decline from another team, it's probably pretty substantial. But for me, it's Trey Turner. I feel like that's the key to a lot of this is he plays the premier position. He's supposed to be at the top of the lineup. Like he's all these things. Bryce Harper, I feel like as a bat, you know what you're gonna get. At this point, you know what you're getting. And Kyle Schwarber's kind of always been what he's been. And Nick Castellanos may not hit for as high of a average as he used to, but he still has some pop. But like Trey Turner, I feel like kind of fell off in almost every category. And we're talking about a guy that used to be one of the best at everything. I mean, he had surprising power numbers. He has awesome speed, or at least, he used to be one of the best stealers in the game. And so, I don't know. I think it's going to be interesting. I don't have them finishing at the top of the division personally. Um, but I think a lot of their success will come down to Trey Turner. I really like their pitching. I don't think that there's going to be any issues for them there. And like you're saying, they have one of the top pitching prospects kind of just waiting for one of those spots to open up for him. So even if they lose someone, I don't think there's going to be a huge drop off for them. Um, yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure how much else I have to say about the Phillies, though. I think they're going to be really good. Just, I don't know if they're going to be as good.
Yeah, I think I see this as the last year of this core's window. I think Schwarber, this is the last year of his contract. Maybe Castellanos too. I can't remember. But I know and I think Real Muto also. So there's like a lot of moving pieces, a lot of money coming off the books. I think Harper will stay in place, and he's still their best hitter, and I think he will be for years to come because he just has the profile. He's not, he's like 31. He's going to be 32 this year, I think. So like he's still got a few years and he's just a lefty masher. He plays first base now. It's not as hard on him. But like, yeah, I think Trey Turner, the decline is a little bit concerning. I don't think he's long for the shortstop position, which is, maybe you always knew that, but it's a little troubling to come this soon into the massive contract that he signed. But at the end of the day, I do think this is a playoff team. I'm with you. I don't think they're going to win the division again. That's just my prediction. But I think they'll be one of the top 6 teams in the National League, and they will get a wild card spot and make the playoffs.
Yeah, just a button on that. It is the final year of both Castellanos and Real Muto's contracts. So, I think that's a big, big thing to watch is where do they end up this year and how does that, shake out in terms of, how those contracts, how those free agencies look. As far as, I'm sure Phillies fans would be split if they do well this year, as far as players, if those players do okay this year, I'm sure they'd be split on maybe wanting one of them out of the 3 of them to stay, if possible. But I don't know if it seems like a well-managed organization. And so I don't know if the organization would feel that way.
I also wouldn't worry if I'm a Phillies fan and this, if they don't win the World Series this year, or even if they do, with all that money coming off the books, they will spend again. Dave Dombrowski is their head of baseball operations. He loves to pay for free agents. Their owner has definitely indicated that he's okay spending money. So while it might be the end of this core, I wouldn't say it's the end of competitive Phillies baseball by any means. I wouldn't expect a big rebuild or anything. And maybe it's good. Castellanos and Schwarber, they're still good hitters, but the defense suffers because they can't both play DH. So, there's trade-offs to be made, and I expect them to keep wheeling and dealing. But we could be looking at a lot different team in a year.
Yeah, and obviously, as we know, certainly in the case of Nick Castellanos, but probably, Real Muto and maybe even Schwarber, if they got an offer, they'd probably hear it. And
even if they're competitive, yeah.
Even if they're competitive, they'd probably take it in the middle of the year, And so, I think that's to be watched as well. Keep an eye on the Phillies at the trade deadline. Who knows? We'll move on to who finished second last year and talk about the Atlanta Braves. So setting up the Braves. The name of the game this offseason seemed to be cost savings. For one reason or another, teams decide that, 1 year is the year to kind of cut the books a little bit. They traded Jorge Soler and let Travis d'Arnaud walk, both Angels now. We'll get to them maybe a little later when we talk about the AL West. They also restructured a couple deals for some back end guys. And then the bigger news though is they lost a few key players in free agency. They lost Max Fried and Charlie Morton from their starting rotation, and they lost AJ Minter from their bullpen. All of those players departed in free agency, and in addition to those players being missing, they will also be missing Spencer Strider, another starting pitcher, and of course Ronald Acuna Jr., their perennial all-star infielder. Or outfielder, sorry, outfielder. And so, to start the year, they'll be missing both of those guys. The prognosis for both of those guys is maybe about April or so. We'll see them come back. So not going to be too long, but definitely to start the year, they won't be there, which led to one of their signings. This offseason, Jurickson Profar was signed to both round out the outfield and then also, to help sub in while Acuna Jr. starts the season on the IL. So that's the Braves. Where do you guys see the Braves going this year?
Matt, you want to start off this one because your boy Jurickson Profar is over there now?
I know, dude. Honestly, it's heartbreaking to see him go. I wish nothing but the best for Profar, though, so I will be rooting for him even in Atlanta. I think he's just a cool guy. Um, I have the Braves winning the division, and it's purely based off of the prediction of health. If they can get their guys back healthy, I do think that they're the best team. And I don't know if that's much in question at this point. We're talking about Spencer Strider, when healthy, was maybe the best pitcher in baseball. Some could argue. And then same goes for Ronald Acuna. I mean, his MVP season a couple years back was electric, and he's shown the kind of player he can be. You add in a guy like Profar, if he plays the way he did in San Diego, they're going to be dangerous. I mean, you're talking about maybe one of the deepest lineups in baseball, period. Like, not, rivaling someone. It's just 1 through 9, just dudes who can play. And I think they have the biggest variance, but that's obviously based off the health. I mean, they had a lot of injuries last year, and that clearly impacted their ability to kind of, make it through the season. And yet they still finished pretty well. Um, but if they're able to stay healthy, I mean, I think they could be probably the second seed coming into the National League playoffs.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think, before last season, the Dodgers got Shohei Ohtani, they got Yoshinobu Yamamoto, and still nearly everyone across the board said the Braves have the best roster, though.
Mhm.
Now I don't think you can really argue it's anyone besides the Dodgers. That's besides the point right now. But still, the Braves, I mean, they lost some guys, but they had the worst luck of any team last year, injury-wise. Everyone spent time hurt. And the guys who didn't, like Matt Olson wasn't, but he had a uncharacteristic season for him. It was still fine, but, wasn't what we'd come to expect. I imagine even if just, injuries happen, there's just no way they can be as injured as last year. And like
Yeah.
you pointed out, they still won 89 games and made the playoffs.
Yeah.
So I definitely this is also my pick to win the division. I think you're right. The lineup is so deep. I mean, you're missing Ronald Acuna Jr. and Spencer Strider to start the year, but that's a Cy Young candidate and an MVP candidate coming back and adding it to that lineup,
Mhm.
which just shifts everyone else down. Chris Sale won the Cy Young last year, his first healthy year in 5
Yeah, and how
years.
about him being healthy? Like,
Right.
truly crazy.
Yeah, and I'll always love Chris Sale. He's one of my favorite
Mhm.
players. And yeah, I mean, it's such a deep lineup. Uh, Everyone can hit in that lineup, or we've seen flashes at the very least. Um, Raisel Iglesias had a great year as their closer last year. Like this is a good team, and you add Profar to it. Will we get the crazy Profar season from last year? I wouldn't count on it, but even if he's just a solid contributor, that's all they need. Michael Harris the second is maybe the most underrated player in this lineup. He's so good, and
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, I don't like to include injuries in my predictions because injuries will happen to anyone. So if I just assume health, then this is in my opinion the best team in this division, and they should win
Yeah.
and maybe get a first round bye.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think they have so much variance in their potential outcome just based off the health. Like, it would be short-sighted not to include it into the prediction, unfortunately. Just
Yeah.
when a team deals with so much like they did, you gotta include it into the analysis. Like, they could win 100 games, they could also win 80 games. Like,
Yeah. And the way I see it is that uh, they had it all last year. Like it just would be weird if it all happened again. You would have some serious questions about their training staff and
hmm
everything. Um, so I'm just gonna assume that it won't be as bad. Like
yeah,
that's just my take on
they traded Ron Washington for the Angels training staff.
it.
Yes, we'll get to Ron Washington a little later. I mean, not a little later, a lot later, depending on when we talk about the AL West. But yeah, so we'll get to him. But yeah, I think the Braves. Look, I fall victim to this too. I can get so recency in my head, and I can underrate certain teams, especially when they can be as good as the Braves can be. When they're, at least maybe not even fully healthy, but like 90% healthy even. Um, Teams that can be as good as them, I tend to forget. And so, yeah, looking into the Braves, for this show, I think I was reminded, oh wait, yeah, like this is still a team that has most of the guys that were, like Drew said, the pretty much the consensus best roster before last year. And these are guys who can get this done. And um, I think they have a good shot to come back this year from their second place finish last year. Um,
I will say it's a bummer that they are clearly in this like saving money mode because they would have been a great team to add like Willie Adames because Orlando
yeah,
Arcia is like the one hole in the lineup. He's not a very good hitter. Uh,
Mhm.
if you added someone like Willie Adames or they lost Max Fried, if they were able to keep him, like I would feel much better about this team. Uh, Even still, they have a great roster, so I'm not overly worried. But it would have been great to see them spend a little bit more money and get a certified guy to add to this group.
Yeah,
yeah,
I agree. Would
yeah.
have been a
Even
really fun team to watch.
convert some of that money that you save by losing two of your two pitchers in your starting rotation to one Willie Adames. Convert it even, but
Mm.
that's just we shouldn't be anywhere near an MLB franchise. The reins of controlling that, but yeah, so that's the Braves. And we'll move on to the team that finished third place but made it the furthest in the playoffs last year. The Mets. Obviously, the Mets grabbed all the major headlines this offseason when they gave Juan Soto his long-awaited giant money long-term contract. The sort of this team for life contract kind of a deal. And so they added Juan Soto. The rest of the signings that they have were mostly retaining people. They retained eventually Pete Alonso. They retained Sean Manaea. They retained Jesse Winker back when they thought they weren't going to maybe retain Pete Alonso, and they retained Ryan Stanek. And then, like we mentioned, the Braves lost AJ Minter. Well, they lost him to the Mets. He went over to the Mets and they signed him. So, um, you know, being that a lot of their signings were sort of around retaining players from last year's team, is the question for the Mets is one Juan Soto enough? You think you make it to the CS, you only need a little bit to get over the hump. You think, and so that's maybe their thinking this offseason is let's run the team back last year, but add something. Where do you guys see the Mets going this year with that one Juan Soto added in?
I'm curious to watch the Mets this year because I mean they're going to be exciting. I think they were really exciting last year. They had the gimmicks and everything. Grimace throwing out the pitch and being their like quasi mascot, and pop star Jose Iglesias, OMG, and all that. Uh, this what concerns me about the Mets is that okay, they went out and they got Juan Soto. That's great. Any team that gets Juan Soto is better for having him. But they were losing three of their five starting pitchers to free agency. That was Jose Quintana, Luis Severino, and Sean Manaea. Now they brought Sean Manaea back, um, and you add that to David Peterson and Kodai Senga. And then they rounded up the rotation with Clay Holmes, who we've seen as a reliever for the last several years, and Frankie Montas, who looked like he could be good a few years ago, but then just really hasn't been that great ever since. And so, like, all this talk about Steve Cohen and his endless pocketbook, and, clearly he flexed his financial muscle to get Juan Soto, but like there was a lot of good starting pitchers in this free agency class, and they really didn't go for any of them. They kept Sean Manaea, and I think that's great. I think he was, one of those guys that really wanted to stay, and so, I don't know if he could have gotten more money elsewhere. I don't know, but I don't really see like I see a lot of pitchers who can be good, but I don't really see that stud, that ace on this team. Um, and things went right, like for Sean Manaea, Luis Severino, and Jose Quintana to be as good as they were last year. Th- those were three names going into last season you would not have been super confident in. And so, like, are we going to get good Sean Manaea, or are we going to get average Sean Manaea? Are we going to get healthy Kodai Senga, or are we going to get injured Kodai Senga? Can Clay Holmes be a starting pitcher? Like, these questions are not nothing. So I think they have a really good lineup, especially the top. I mean, you go Lindor, Soto, Pete Alonso, 1, 2, 3. That is not going to be easy for opposing
Mm-hmm.
pitchers. But I just don't know if they have the depth, and I don't know if they have the pitching to keep up with the other teams in their division and the other teams in the National League. So I don't know. I don't know where I stand on the Mets. I feel like I would be excited if I was a Mets fan, but I'm also like, this is not a slam dunk playoff team to me.
Yeah, I to be honest, I think you even are a little bit higher. I know we had our Juan Soto discussion earlier in the offseason. I think you're a little bit higher on the impact he brings to a team, and maybe that's because I firsthand saw a pretty disappointing Padres team with Juan Soto in it. Um, I think that they'll be perfectly average. Um, and I don't know if this is me just trauma dumping because of my past experiences. I also think Sean Manaea was awesomely average everywhere he's been except last year. And so when I look at some of these players, I'm like, yeah, they're pretty much the exact same team with Juan Soto. But I also think that they had quite a few players overperform last year. And, there's, is Iglesias still there?
No, he's a free agent right
Yeah, he
now.
moved. Yeah. And I'm like, I think something that maybe people forget is like guys like that can bring a lineup together. They can bring a team together. And it's when you start to lose some of the like round out the edges glue guys in favor of the big flashy superstar, I think that can have an impact on a team. And I don't doubt that Juan Soto is going to put up his numbers. And he's hitting in between two really good hitters. I just don't know if that translates to wins in their case. And they are in a really good division. I mean, I think the Braves and Phillies are two of the best teams in the NL, just flatly. And I don't know if that leaves much room for them. I mean, obviously they got in as a wild card and they could do it again, but I don't know. I have them squarely finished third. I have them sitting just above 500. I don't know if they're going to be all that, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, I think I like to Dallas's point from earlier, like we get caught up in what we've seen lately. And
Mm-hmm.
I think, we all have this fresh memory of the Mets making the playoffs on the last day of the season and then beating the Brewers in miraculous fashion and then taking it to the Phillies and then even looking good in a couple games against the Dodgers. And it's like, okay, the Mets must be one of the top teams. But the year before, they were so bad they had to trade Max Scherzer, Justin Verlander, so like
Hmm.
it wasn't like this is a mainstay playoff team that we've seen. You're right that we saw good years from guys that were unexpected. Jose Iglesias isn't even back, but like he was like a minor league guy that ended up
Mhm.
being good for them. And I like Mark Vientos a lot. I think he could be a great hitter. Brandon Nimmo did not have his best year last year, so maybe if he bounces back, the lineup's much stronger. But outside of that, like Francisco Alvarez had a disappointing year at the plate. Jesse Winker, uh, like he was good for the Mets last year, but like it's been like 3 or 4 years since he was like a consistently good major league player. Jeff McNeil has been mostly bad. Jose Siri, who they added, is a great defensive center fielder, but he can't hit much. Like,
Mhm.
I don't know. Like, their lineup is their strength, but really, when you look at it, it's like the top half of their lineup is their strength. And then they have a really good closer in Edwin Diaz, uh, probably a solid bullpen overall. But yeah, like, I'm with you. I don't, I think it's perfectly reasonable to think this team could make the playoffs, but right now, they're not a lock the same way the Phillies and the Braves are in my head.
Yeah, yeah. I just think there's a lot of potential for them to be worse with not as much for them to get better, personally.
Yeah, and even to speak to Drew's point, even forget two seasons ago or whatever. Even last year in the first half of the regular season, you have and into the second half, you have them having to bring in Edwin Diaz. Just to get him some work, not because they're in high leverage situations where they can win games and he can get saves. They're bringing him in half empty stadiums. They're doing the Tommy Trumpet thing. No one's there because they're getting whooped, but he just needs work, because they're not
Yeah.
they're not keeping games close enough to get him in regularly. And so, even last year, they, like Drew said, they barely snuck in, and that's what that stuff was happening just before the last quarter of the season. And so, you don't even have to go back even that far to get to a point where we would see maybe the Mets are a little bit more on the mid side than we thought, than we think now, maybe. But yeah, so there's the Mets, and now move to the bottom of this division, and perhaps to the bottom of the maybe not yet the bottom of the sport, near the bottom of the sport, but we'll talk about the Nationals next, and sort of to set them up, their mid rebuild, and their offseason showed it a little bit. They have taken the slower approach of some of the teams that are rebuilding right now. And their offseason reflected that. They traded for Nathaniel Lau, and they added Josh Bell to their lineup here. And other than that, not too much to note for the Nationals this year as far as offseason moving and shaking. Given that this team was the fourth place finisher last year, they didn't really add anybody of that much significance. It was basically a swap at first base, and then whatever you want. What do you guys see for the Nationals in 2025?
Um, I am actually really excited about them. I think that their young core is really good, like really, really good. And obviously, a lot of that comes from the original Juan Soto trade, right? We're going to see CJ Abrams, who at times last year looked dominant. He's always been a little streaky on defense, but his bat seemed to come to life last year and show a lot more pop than I think people expected. Um, so seeing if he can keep that up over a course of a season, I mean, we could be looking at a really great year for him. But then mixing in Dylan Cruz, one of the top picks, James Wood, who looked really good at times in his kind of first year playing at the big leagues. I really like Nathaniel Lowe too. I think that he's going to be really solid for them at first base. I think he's a good bat. Um, I think that they're going to be more competitive than people want to give them credit for. I don't think their pitching staff is all that great. I think there's a lot of room for improvement, but I mean, every team has to start somewhere. Um, and I think having a young core of players like they do can go a long way in their success. Um, and so with that, I mean, we'll see. I have them finishing about exactly where I have the Mets finishing, if I'm being honest. I don't think that their team is that much different than the Mets in terms of the success I see them having. So I don't know. Maybe that's a crazy take, but just from my perspective, I think they're going to be really good. I like that young core guys they have. I think they're going to be really fun to watch.
I'm gonna half agree, half disagree with you. I agree that the young core is really exciting, and I think they will be a fun team to watch. The names you mentioned, they also got Brady House, who should debut at some point this year, and Robert Hassel the third at some point should
Also, ex
be
Padre.
right. I mean, they traded Juan Soto, they traded Trey Turner, they traded Max Scherzer. Like they traded a lot of guys that were part of their 2019 World Series run. And when you do that, this is, I mean, I'm not going to say it's best case scenario because we have not seen it fully play out, but
Mm-hmm.
it seems like they got a lot of decent pieces in those moves. Like Kyber Ruiz at catcher has not been what they wanted. But JoJo Gray was pitching well, and then he's unfortunately injured. But Mackenzie Gore should be their opening day starter. He was part of that Juan Soto trade. CJ Abrams was an all-star last year. He was part of that trade. James Wood was part of that trade. He should be in the middle of their lineup. They're exciting. I think a lot of fans, including myself, wanted them to kind of look at their young core and jump on the opportunity to like supplement the core with some
Yeah.
free agent signings. Like I thought Pete Alonso could have been a good fit. I mean, they got Nathaniel Lowe. I don't think that's that much of a difference. Even if the name is not as well known, I think Nathaniel Lowe's production could be just as good as Pete Alonso, just maybe with less home runs. Um, I just don't think they're at the point yet to compete for a playoff spot. I think they'll be better than they were last year. I just think there's not enough depth. The pitching staff is not good enough, and just too many of the guys haven't done it yet. It's going to be hard to imagine all the young guys coming up and all being good enough for them to make the playoffs. We saw it kind of with the Rangers last year. They had Evan Carter and Wyatt Langford that we thought, oh, like these could be 1-2 in Rookie of the Year, and they both had injuries and struggles, and it just didn't pan out that way. Um, and I just think the National League is too
Yeah.
deep. I mean, this is going to be a theme throughout our division previews that the National League is a much deeper league than the American League, and I just think the Nationals are still a year or two away and an addition or two away. I like Nathaniel Lowe. I think he brings a good veteran head on his shoulders. He'll put up a good at bat. I don't really understand the Josh Bell addition. He hasn't been good in quite some time.
He had
And
like 10 games with the Diamondbacks where he was pretty solid, right?
yeah, I guess. But I wanted them to do more in free agency. They obviously didn't. Maybe this core shows that it's worth building around, and next year they add some names, but I don't think they're playoff ready yet. Do you have a question?
Um, Before we transition off the Nets, I am very excited about them. Not sure if you had more to say about them. Uh, your boy just got signed. Uh, Red Sox just signed Bregman.
Whoa, what?
Wow. Wow.
ESPN notification, three
That is
years, 120 million. Alex Bregman to the Red Sox.
That's huge. Huge.
Yeah.
Oh
So
man,
that's
that's
that's a something.
that's perfect.
Wow.
I won't go too deep on this. We can save it for the AL East, which is next week. So perfect
Yeah.
timing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But a 3-year deal for Alex Bregman is best case
Hmm.
scenario because I wanted him in the lineup in 2025 and sure, maybe a couple other years. I was worried about a 6 or 7 year contract for him. Uh,
Getting him for
I'm pretty
three is ideal.
I'm pretty shocked because I thought he was like dead set not taking that kind of contract, and it seemed like the Astros 6-year deal had been on the table. Oh, I'm stoked. That takes, and this is just a little teaser preview. That takes the Red Sox from like they have a shot at the playoffs to like it'll be a major disappointment if they miss the playoffs.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm excited to get into the AL East next week. It's gonna be fun.
All right, thanks for the heads up on that. But yeah, the
Yeah,
Nationals,
no, just popped up.
not quite there yet, but have some exciting guys.
Right on. Can you guys hear me? We can cut
Yes.
this. Okay. All right. I had some problems in the middle of that, but okay, we're all good. All right. So moving on from the Nationals. Actually, one question on the Nationals. I have a
Yeah.
question. Um, the We're seeing a couple of different approaches in the league to rebuilds these days. Some teams try to fast track it a little bit with big trades, one after the other. Get the prospects that are as close as you possibly can get them, and bring them up. When you can, as soon as you can. And then you have teams that take the slower approach. If you were in charge of a team that had maybe not aging stars, but big stars, and you had the opportunity to see a rebuild in your future. You have a couple of big prospects, not quite ready yet, but you will be good in the future. If you're in that position, what do you do if you're in that spot?
I think if I'm in that spot, it means I'm not viewing it from a fan perspective, and that changes things a little bit because it's really hard. Like the Juan Soto trade is the biggest example for the Nationals, right? Like he
Yeah.
still had 3 years of control left when they traded him, or 2.5 or whatever, and he was a fan favorite. He was only like 22 or 3 or whatever he was when they traded him, and he had already been a star in the league. That being said, the reports were he declined an extension offer for like 450 million, which at the time I think would have made him the highest paid player.
Hmm.
Anyway, obviously, credit to Juan Soto, he was right to wait. He made way more money than that. But if you're the Nationals, you're like, okay, he's not going to say yes to that. Like, we can't give him much more. Let's get a haul for him, and they absolutely did get a haul. And credit the Padres for being willing to give up a haul to get a guy who could help them win. But that, you know, I think all their trades have made sense. Whether the pieces they get back are the right pieces, that's always the question. But I don't think they really had any trades where it's like, really? I think at the time we were like, you're going to trade Juan Soto, but like knowing what we know about the contract offers and stuff, like that's as big of a haul as we've ever seen for a trade. So, and clearly now we're ready to see that in action with these guys all going to be in the lineup. Um, so I like it because it's a lot easier to build a team when you have the cheap prospects and the young
Mm-hmm.
players that are uh, going to help you make the playoffs, and they don't cost very much because then you can supplement in other ways. It's easier than, let's say, like the Phillies. Once Dave Dombrowski came in, it was just like spend money, spend money, spend money. Obviously, that has worked to an extent too. Um, but I like the creative trades.
Yeah. I think personally, when it comes to like the younger guys, it really, I mean, this feels like a cop out maybe, but it does feel like it really depends, right? Like we don't see these guys at practice. We don't see how they're doing in their spring games. Oh, some of them we will, but like we're not as close to the situation. I think with like football, right? Like there's a lot of guys who are breakout stars or guys who get a lot of playing time that we question every year, right? I mean, everyone's gonna, come from the Rams perspective. We had no idea Puka was gonna be Puka, dude. But the Rams did. And then you see their draft room videos and it's Sean McVay saying, like, I've got a plan for this guy. I can make this guy into something. And it's like, clearly they know stuff that we don't. And there's a reason they're in the positions they are, usually. But with that being
Yeah.
said, I don't know. I like the idea of constantly having the like teeter-tottering balance of like good veterans with young potential. And you can do that kind of in a trade-off way of like, right now the Nats got this young core four dudes. They can bring in some free agency veterans. They could have bolstered their pitching staff. They could have brought in a couple veteran hitters to, kind of pad the edges of that lineup. And I think it would have done really well for them. And maybe they could have gotten into the playoffs. We still don't know. But, we would have been talking about them as like a contender to make playoffs. But instead, they're going to wait and see, what do they have. And that could work out because maybe they spend all this money and the core doesn't work out, and then they're just stuck with a lot of bloated contracts and no future. But at the same time, like, I don't know. I think you have to always take the aggressive approach in sports. I think if you sit back on sit on your hands for too long, you're never going to get back up. Um, it takes a shift of mentality, and it's like you've got the young guys. You gave up stars for the young guys, and the young guys are here now. So like, put a team around them.
Yeah.
And who's to say, they're not going to be aggressive at the trade deadline, and who's to say that they're not looking at next year's free agency? It's just in the moment, I think as a Nats fan, you're probably like excited, but also a little bit just like, I was hoping for a little more.
Yeah, I think in this case, their approach is justifiable for two reasons. Now, I'm not saying it's 100% justifiable. Like, you should try to improve the team whenever you can. You should trust your evaluations. So, like, if you think all these guys are going to be good, then you should try to build around them. However, them being in this tough, just stacked National
Yeah,
League, I don't necessarily blame them. And you know, they were not a good team last year. So like if you have a year this year where it's like maybe you sneak into a playoff spot or maybe you're somewhere in the hunt and it's like, okay, we see what we have with this team, then you capitalize on it. I think it'd be much more egregious if they were in the American League, and I think it'd be much more egregious if they won, like, let's say 5 to 10 more games last year. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, we'll see what they have.
well, let me ask you this, Drew, and I mean Dallas too, if you have an answer for it. But like, when it comes to that kind of like timeline, obviously, yes, the National League is stacked. Yes, there's only three wild card spots, and we can basically account for four teams that are going to get them. At the same time, I'm like, I as a sports fan, like, it does feel like that idea of just like lying down, even if just for a season, feels weird. And I get what you're saying of like, you want to know what you have before you start investing too much, guaranteed money and putting too much money on the books. And at the same time, I'm like, I don't know, how long do you think you're allowed to wait for a conference to come down or even a division to come down? Because they're in one of the, I would argue, the second toughest division in the NL. And it's just like, how long do you think you get? Because I'm not as familiar with like the years of control that people get on their players. It's not like football, which is pretty much just like anywhere from 3 to 5 years based off rookie contracts. But like, at some point, all these guys are either going to leave or get paid,
Yeah.
and they're all accruing MLB, service time right now. And I don't know. I mean, how long do you give a team in their position before they need to start making moves? Because let's
Yeah.
say they have the exact same record, their core looks decent. Do you now just invest next year? Because,
The answer in this case is I give them one more year,
okay.
because there is a lot of team control left over here, like a lot. Uh, so this is not, a make or break year for them. But if they show any sort of promise this year and then don't add like at least what it seems to be like playoff caliber players, then that's a problem. And that unfortunately that's what a lot of teams do. Um, and that's just the bummer. It also like we need our teams that aren't really trying in any given year because the trade deadline is like so much more boring now that like so many teams make the playoffs and like you know we
Yeah.
need top and bottom of the food chain.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and we'll get to them at some point, obviously, but I think one of the best examples right now is Kansas City. Like, they literally did that. They based it off of, I mean, pretty much Bobby Witt Jr. They're like, hey, we got a dude, let's build a team.
Mm-hmm.
And it worked. Like, they were
Yeah,
awesome and they were
and I
fun.
will
And
say the AL Central is every year just such a winnable division. If you try a little bit, you might be able to do it. So,
yeah, I mean,
every
it's
scenario is
different.
a little different, but yeah.
Yeah.
True. Right on. So let's wrap up the NL East here. With the team that finished last year, and bottom of the division, and here may be the bottom of baseball. We may do it here just to start the whole previews. But biggest story for the Marlins. That's who we're talking about here. Marlins of Miami. They once again have a new manager. Clayton McCullough is now in charge of leading the Marlins through whatever hell this season has for that team. So what do we see for the Marlins in 2025?
I have one word written down next to them for my notes, and it's just uh-oh.
Is that one word or is that two? I don't know.
I think if you were to put it into a word counter, the dash makes it one, right?
Okay. Yeah, the Marlins are just bad. They
Hmm.
are just, I mean, the one little tiny silver lining they had was like they had good pitching. They traded most of it away. Sandy's coming back from Tommy John, so um, maybe he can be good again. It's always questionable when you come off an injury like that. But their lineup is just so bad. And they traded Jake Berger, who is not even that good, but he was their best hitter last year. Uh, there's a
It's
couple
basically just
young,
Xavier, and that's it, right?
yeah, there's a couple guys like Xavier Edwards. They made that trade to get Kyle Stowers from Baltimore. Like maybe a couple of these guys could be something, but it's the Marlins. They don't get the benefit of the doubt. They have bungled so many trades and good players over the years. I mean, they had Jazz Chisholm that they got in a prospect for prospect trade, and he was good for them, and he was hurt a little bit. But like the stories out of the clubhouse was that everyone hated him because he had a personality, and it's like like just things like that where the Marlins are just so behind the curve on almost everything. Um, and they traded, their best pitcher from last year, Jesus Luzardo, and they traded their best hitter from last year in Jake Berger. They didn't add anyone. They signed Cal Quantrill like literally today. That's their first free agent they signed
Yeah.
this offseason, and he is, he'll eat some innings. Like that's what he does. Um, and then they're in this division, which we kind of talked up every other team already. They have to face each of them 14 times apiece. Uh, this is just, I mean, I'd be surprised if there was a worse team than the Marlins this year. I mean, there's a couple other teams in contention, but like, just you just look at this lineup and you look at this roster, and it's just like, ugh, like I would not want to be a Marlins fan.
Yeah. What do you think? What do you think the floor is? What do you think in their loss total? Are we talking last year's White Sox? I mean,
I can't I can't in good conscience call anyone last year's White Sox. That was literally the worst team in
so
baseball
let's do it in
history.
bad conscious.
But I think 110 could easily be in range for this team. They already lost
Ah,
100.
110, right there, right there.
There you
Yeah.
go.
So I never like to make record predictions because you have to do all the math to make everything add up to like 500 or whatever. That's really hard
Right,
to do.
right, right.
But like I just like 100 is like minimum they're going to lose 100 games. I can't imagine they'll be better than they were last year. So it's just a real bummer. I don't know if there are Marlins fans. I've never heard of one, but if there are any, then it's just going to be another long year after a series of long years. I mean, they made the playoffs a couple years ago. No one really remembers that. They snuck in. Different team now. Just
I only know of one Marlin fan, and he always seems to be at other stadiums for some reason.
that's so true. Yeah, Marlins man. Fun.
But yeah, we don't have, yeah, we can round out Marlins talk there. The rule is, you get maybe like 1 second for every win that you're going to get, and that's it. So that's the NL East. So before we end the show, let's run down for the people, for the record, make it clear your finishing order. You don't need to do win or loss totals. You can if you want. But finishing order for this division, we'll start with Drew.
Yeah, I think it's going to go Braves, Phillies, Mets, Nationals, Marlins. That's my prediction.
All right.
Yeah,
And
keeping
Matt?
it easy. Keeping it easy. I have the exact same order.
Okay.
Yep.
Great. And then
And
at the end of all of our division previews, we will say which teams we think will round out the playoff field, and then we'll do playoffs and World Series later. And so, yeah, but that's for now the finishing order for 2025 for the NL East for our show. And next week, we are going to talk about the AL East, which, like we mentioned, just got a big bump. So, we're going to have some fun, talking about, the new look Red Sox infield, with, the addition of Alex Bregman. And then we'll, talk more ALE stuff, next week. But, for now, we'll also mentioned it earlier though, Drew is going to have, some writing that he's doing, that's going to kind of go with all of these division previews. So think of it as a little bit of a companion piece for these shows. And we'll link them in the YouTube video and everything like that. And definitely take a look at that if you wanted to, have a sort of companion piece for these previews. So other than that, anything from you guys?
Just to
Nah,
note
man.
that you're not going to get a ton of new information from my blog that's compared to what we're talking about here, but I do include bold predictions that I did not share in the podcast. So that's your little reason to go check it out.
Yeah,
Sure.
teaser, go in and take a look. But yeah, so if that's it from us this week, thank you so much for watching, listening, however you do it. We appreciate the love. Share us around. Like I said, last week, we're getting socials up and running here soon. So we'll be sharing ourselves around after a little while, but, for now we rely on you. Share us around a little bit. If you can, we appreciate it. But, other than that, just tune in again next week for another great episode of Dingers and Singers. It was great, this week, and we'll see you guys next week.
Yes, sir.
Bye.
Yeah.